right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. And thank you all for coming to, and you can hear me, right? Okay. Thank you all for coming to the Raga experience, and this is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature with administrative supports from Arts Westchester. So in this Raga experience, this is a 2-day event, and today what we're doing here is giving a brief introduction into Indian classical music, how to appreciate it as a listener, and we'll be talking about 3 foundational elements of Indian classical music, which includes rhythm, or we call them thala, and then also vocals, and the foundational term for those vocals are based off of ragas, or in Western music theories, similar to scales. And then we'll also do some demonstrations of instruments. And so today we have 3 very well accomplished performers. And first we are going to start with rhythm, and I would like to welcome Mr. Samir Chatterjee. And Samir is a virtuoso tabla player. He travels widely across the world throughout the year, performing in numerous festivals as a soloist or with other outstanding musicians from Indian and Western traditions. He performed at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony in Oslo, Norway in December of 2007, and he has also performed at the UN General Assembly several times. His compositions are widely acclaimed, as well as his writings. Samir can be heard on numerous recordings featuring as a soloist, accompanying many of India's greatest musicians, and in collaboration with Western musicians of outstanding caliber. Samir lives in New Jersey and has been a catalyst in the fusion of Indian and Western music in New York City metro area. So I do want to remind the audience about a few things. Please, if you could turn off your cell phones, that would be great, or mute them. If you need to take a call, please go outside to take your call. Just the session will be more of an educational experience for you all, where we'll talk about Indian classical music and also draw some parallels to Western music theory. And also for the session, I will be moderating. My name is Swagatha Biswas, and I would love for Samir to start.
Thank you, Swagata. Thank you, Sataki. Thank you for being here today. I guess it'll be okay if I take up all 3 hours. And the other speakers can come back tomorrow. I think they also feel the same way, Jonathan, on your plan.
You can come tomorrow also.
Because it's not just out of our personal, it's kind of a requirement for the topic that we're here to cover. Talk about raga, thala, or application of both on instruments, any duration of time given here now is too short. Let's start listening to some music. Always.
Saw the ads on YouTube.
It's pity we can get it through the system. No, it's good. Are we trying to?
Good, give that.
So what Samir will do now is speak to some of the things you saw in that video, especially touching on rhythm, and how rhythm plays into Raga music.
How many of you were familiar with that music or anything part of the video and audio? Yes.
I know the movie, I think it's Raga,
Yes. And any other information?
and that person was singing in this actor Percussion.
Thompson versus Vejibar. It was a contest. Where was it? Akbar School.
And
Yes.
V. Shantaram was also singing with them,
Right.
I think.
The singers, do you know their names? No.
Singers,
On the screen. And they were holding two instruments. What were the instruments in that video or the audio?
the Veena,
None of those.
Tantra.
And did you hear any percussion instrument? What was it? Tabla. So the names of the singers are not known to you. And were they singing a song? Was it based on any particular mode,
Or,
scale?
yeah, it was over a minor mode we use all the time, right? It was a minor third, major second, major sixth, minor seventh. That's Dorian.
Dorian, pretty close. And in the Indian context, we would call it a raga, Deshi Dori, particularly for this time of the day. And anybody had any clue about the rhythmic cycle that was being used? Tintal. In what level of tempo or laya? Always? Did it open with that? So I see that most of you are familiar with the music we are here to understand and appreciate Indian music. And when we talk about Indian music, we mainly, what we are referring to here is the Indian classical music. because here folk means something that has been going on for some time, tradition. So when Chattoki or I or anybody applies for any kind of grant, we have to apply in that kind of category, not as classical music. But outside, or particularly in India, in Asia, in South Asia, this is classical music. And if you go to Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, they cannot call it Indian classical music, they will call it classical music. So they are also using the two same principles of melody, raga, and thala. So in order to create a little bit of context, even though those information might all be known to us, maybe not to all of us, may I have ask for the indulgence to go over some little details, information? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So that was my area of the thala I'll be talking mainly on. But before that, music is integral to Indian society. It is part of every social activity, be it a festival, celebration, or funeral. Every region in the country has its own musical sound, melody, rhythm, and style, creating a boundless variety. The imperative attachment of people to music suggests its position parallel to their religious faith. New musical genre emerge out of new spiritual movement. And I think most of you are familiar with this map of India, the location of India in the whole of Asia. And the origin of Indian music, as evidenced by several excavations, goes back to the inception of Indian civilization. Natya Shastra, the earliest text related to Indian music, dates back to 300 BC, written in Sanskrit by Bharata Muni on theatre and performing arts. This text includes valuable remarks on music, and in that text he is doing salutation to 20 generations before him. And that, so far that's our only clue how old it is. Next, Sangeet, Indian music, is commonly referred to as Sangeet, not the one that's limited in meaning now before the wedding. Sangeet, Nritya Geeta Vadyameva Sangeetam Uchyate. It's a combination of dance, vocal music, and instrumental music. Indian word for music is Sangeet. In ancient times, Sangeet meant a combination of dance, singing, and instrumental music. Through the process of evolution, dance separated. Now Sangeet means only music. In the past, dancers, the apsaras, were given the highest rank, singers, Gandharvas, second, and the instrumentalists, the kinnaras, the third position. Today it is almost reversed in order. Why it was like that? Because the dancers were allowed to stand, and because this music used to be performed in the temples. They were the only ones allowed to stand and be close to the deities. From that to the Mughal court, and then today to the performance. So this is the next slide. In the ancient times, Sangeet used to be performed in the temples as an offering to the deities. During the Mughal period, it was brought to the royal courts to entertain the rulers, humans, no matter what the position is. Today, it is performed for the mass in public venues. Recorded and public media have brought it to households and common places. This has changed the performance scenario and nature of the music quite significantly. We have to take these things into account. The type of music you just heard is pretty old for contemporary times. Raga and thala. Indian music, similar to any other music, is made of two elements: the melodic element known as raga and the rhythmic element known as thala. Innumerable ragas and thalas are used in Indian music. Different ragas are designated for different times of the day and seasons. They use appropriate thalas to go with the compositions in them. Raga is often described as a scale or melodic mode. It is an arrangement of a set of notes in a particular ascending and descending order. One of those notes is to be highlighted the most, called the Vadiswara, and another to be highlighted next, Samavadiswara. There are also key phrases like motif to help in creating the melodic ambience of the raga. Tala is a rhythmic cycle. Indian word for that is avartan, of a set number of beats, matras, root word is meter, arranged in particular bar pattern, vibhag. Some of the bars are marked with clapping, like this, while some are not. But these are actions with sound, without sound, and they had designated values in the past. There were more sound actions with sound, like this, and then more actions without sound, directional. And they all had designated values. Combination of those could bring out or express the number of beats in the cycle.
Let me also interject a little bit. So with Tala, if for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with what Tala is or how that concept works in Indian classical music, you can compare that to, say we take 4/4 time, right? And so each 4/4, so in that 4/4 time you have measures, and within those measures typically you count in quarter notes. And so it's just like what Samir was saying, what can you fit in that measure? Through improvisation and such. So that's where you can draw the comparison. And where he was talking about clapping and different emphasis and different measures we can say. Typically when you start, it's called the sum, and the sum is your downbeat. I'll let Samir.
Quite tricky. It's a dangerous aspect she brought in, because when we take in new information, we usually bring the reference from our stored memory. It may sometimes work, sometimes may not. If it doesn't, we'll be completely lost. So, the bringing in references from other types of music can be helpful, but harmful as well. So I would always recommend taking a fresh look at it. Some of the bars are marked with clappings, while some are not. Indian song or composed music is always set to tala. The application of tala varies from simple, obvious to intricate and intriguing. Here is an example of a tala of 16 beats, and that's how talas are notated. There's always a question, can Indian music be notated? Yes, the melodic and the rhythmic both. And there are two systems prevailing right now, introduced by two of the missionaries, greatest, almost saintly individuals, because of whom we are here today talking about music. Otherwise, it will be all confined into the courts or the royals. Names are Bhatkhandiji and Paluskaji. So they created, and later on we modified. Here we have one particular tala, Teen Tal, which is the most common. That's the one we heard in the video. And it goes as dha, din, din, dha, dha, din, din, dha, na, tin, tin, ta, ta, din, din, dha. The beat numbers on top of every note or beat, and then there are signs like plus 2, 0, 3. Plus is the first clapping, 2 is the second clapping, 0 is the khali or the unclapped section, and 3 is the third clapping. Why plus sign? Because that is called the sum, the most important beat of the cycle. So it is marking the end of the previous one, introducing a new cycle. Dha, din, din, dha. What are those? Those are actually drum notes. And these are articulations of sounds that produce from the tabla. That's dha. And din. So if I play only the right hand drum, you will hear an A, B, B, A pattern. Listen closely. And then I will add the left hand, the bass drum, to the first 8 notes. Absence of the bass in the third section. And then back to the bass. That is the cycle, Tintal, that you heard in the recording. But all of these cycles, rhythmic cycles, enjoy a tremendous amount of elasticity in terms of tempo. So they can be very slow, almost unrecognizable. So Tintal from Matala, the medium tempo, is here. Slowing down. If someone played the theka like that or the tal like that, we may not be completely lost, but they don't like to do that somehow. They add a lot more notes in between. Let's see. So, in the slower tempo, we hear it. Just its skeleton. Just the first 4 beats of the cycle. That's where Indian music can become a little classical as such. Is meant to be challenging always, not just to the performers but to the listeners also. That's part of the definition of classical. Now, what someone likes to sing in most often, ektal. If I play it at this tempo, So you need to keep track of those subdivisions to be able to stay with the cycle.
So maybe we can have the audience interact with this a little bit. So
Little later.
Okay.
It's too early for them.
too early. But do you want to go over how the hand gestures work with counting?
Not yet.
Okay.
Wait.
Mhm.
So, like Teen Tal, which we talked about, here are a few other tals that we commonly use. Rupak Tal of 7 beats. Now, in Indian context, we look at 7 as 3-2-2. In Western, sometimes it's 3-4 more often. Jhap Tal in Persian music is looked at very differently, but in Indian context, it is 2-3-2-3. Ek Tal, which I was just demonstrating, it has two versions, 6 2s or 4 3s. Chotal, 2-2-2-2, or usually people conceive of that as 4-4-4, broader measures or longer measures. Dhamar Tal of 14 beats, there's a little bit of suspense towards the end of each section. Two things are always intriguing in terms of rhythm or any other aspect of life: space. Keeping track of space and stepping down. We see that in politics a lot. Not easy. So, our impulses don't allow us to be comfortable with those two. Keharbatal, very common, like this. And in these tals, because they belong to a particular category known as the Tumbi category of tals, tals can be categorized as Drupad based on their origin and application, Drupad Ang, Khayal Ang, and Tumbi Ang. So Chotal, for example, or Dhamar, for that example, belongs to the Drupad Ang. The intonation, articulation of those tals are very different. For example, so very flamboyant, open, resonant, and all of that, as opposed to. So tals also have their characteristics and personalities like the ragas do. What we do through the practice of our music in terms of raga and tala is pretty similar to what we do in a temple or in a church. We add life to something that's inanimate, an image or a sculpture, and we add life and talk, have a conversation. Same thing happens with this in music. We add life to these notes and beats and make them come alive. The next, some we talked about, Tali, Khali, Avartan, Vibhag, Theka, Tihai. Somebody just said to me that today I had too much of tea, so I am Tihai. What is Tihai? Anybody has any idea? It's pretty similar to, if we bring in analogies from Western music, Telaya color that used to be part of Burgo music, Romantic period. We often do that, repeat something to create an ending. And in this context, we are somehow fixed with repeating 3 times. So we choose a phrase, repeat it 3 times to mark an ending. That is precisely what Tihai is. It can be built in within the composition or maybe outside. Dha dha, tun tun, na na, tete tete, katete, katete, kateta, 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 built in within the composition. You heard it. katata, 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 like that. Or it can be at the end of a longer composition where we just come up with that set, memorized or improvised ending called tihai. In South Indian music, they have something similar but slightly different. Tihai is always intended to land on the downbeat of the next cycle. But in Carnatic music, in Korbai, which is the equivalent of tihai, it ends before the downbeat. Ranjayati ti raga, that is the ultimate motive purpose of raga, that to color the mind. So by following all the guidelines of the ascending, descending order, highlighting vadis, samavadi, all these guidelines, motive and everything, your ultimate purpose is to evoke a particular type of sentiment, mood, rasa and bhava. Rasa is sentiment or emotion, and bhava is mood. Rasa or emotional sentiments are identifiable, bhava is unidentifiable. That's rasa. These are the 9 rasas we have referred to. 8 of them from Bharata's Natya Shastra, then the 9th one was added later on in his commentary. Abhinava Gupta added, which is Shanta. And you might notice in this list there is no mention of devotion. I will leave that for you to ask a question later on. Maybe Swagata will have an answer to that. And these are the parallels of the rasa, the bhavas next to the rasas. Hindustani and Carnatic, we mentioned that these ragas and talas are presented in 2 distinctly different styles, coming from the south and the north. This happened in the early part of the 14th century. Earlier, before that, it was just one kind of music. And musical notes, we call them swaras, and then there are finer divisions or degrees of these notes, frequencies, vibrations. We refer to them. Microtones, they call microtone, quartertone, and all of that. We call them shrutis. And in Indian music, that is what we still use, 22 shrutis. And many of them, of course, in a temper tone instrument like the piano, you won't find 10 of them. And not only on the instruments, but our ears are also failing to recognize many of these sounds of the tones as musical. So sometimes they may sound out of tune, but they are actually notes, positions. Indian names for the solfeggio, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, and they have their naturals and flats and the raised or the augmented ones. Combination of that becomes the 12 notes. The small letters are the komal, what we refer to as, komal basically means tender. And tivra means sharp. The ma, the 4th is raised. These are the actual names of the notes, formal names. Sa is called sharaj. And sometimes you hear these words in compositions. Guru Shishya Parampara. So this is how Indian music is taught and learned. Master-disciple relationship. And this knowledge is called Guru Mukhi Vidya. It comes from the mouth of the Guru. Samarth, when he speaks, he gets a chance. He will elaborate on his training, perhaps. How he is doing everything perfect as he understood, but sitting with his Guru, he's saying, no, it's not happening. And he's wondering, what is not happening? Sadhana, in our pursuit, we call it, we add a little bit of spiritual value to the practice. And this can happen through the simple process of regular practice, which has all the qualities of meditation and even more. Exposure to transforming vibrations absorbed through all portals of the body. And that is what glues us to this music. Yeah, because we're all seekers. Parallel to Indian classical music, as I mentioned earlier, we have very popular now film music. It's been going on for decades, which is very popular. It used to be popular only in South Asia and East Europe, but now worldwide. The pop music, the folk music, even the tribal music. Here are some of the instruments. The tampura you mentioned. Here is the veena. You see two chords. Here is another type of veena. All stringed instruments, for that matter, used to be referred to as veenas. And all percussion instruments used to be referred to as mridang. Mrid-ang, clay-bodied. Sitar and surbahar. Surbahar is the bass sitar. Commonly they simplify, but there are more intricacies in that. And in the format of presentation, they after Surbahar came into use, they used to use that to play the alap section, the free unfolding of the ragas, and then pick up the sitar to play the compositions because of the deep sound, more sustained. Sarod got modified from the rabab, and you see that they changed the flavor. Anirban will elaborate on that. On the rabab, you can't do the slides. There are certain requirements, raga requirements. Samarth will elaborate on those. And here is Sur Singar, which was played by Baba Alauddin Khan Sahib, because when he went to study with Ustad Wazir Khan didn't accept him as a student, but then the Nawab forced him to teach him. But after he was accepted in the household but not taught, until Wazir Khan lost his son. Wazir Khan himself was a veena player, and he didn't want to teach veena to any outsider. It should stay within the lineage, within his own family. But after his son died, he called Alauddin Khan and said, "You have been serving me so well for so many years, I want to teach you." And then Alauddin Khan says, "Baba, I'm so grateful that you finally are taking pity on me, but I won't learn veena from you. That I have no right. That should belong to your family. Teach your music to me on the sursingar." Indian oboe, Indian flute, sarangi, one of the most beautiful instruments. India has got a board instrument, mesmerizing sound. Hammer dulcimer, santoor from Persia through Kashmir came in. Jal taran, we don't hear it anymore, but they used to fill up those bowls with water, and when they toured abroad, the water froze in the countries. I'm joking. Not Indian, but now very popular. You see them on the stage all the time, harmonium, because it can't play the Shrutis, the microtones. Swan Mandal, they take it as a support to just be in the raga mood. Oh, this instrument I don't know. The bass drum and the treble drum, bass is called the baya and the treble is called the dahina. And the hammer is mainly to tune my head. No, the drum head. The right hand drum is the only one which is tuned always to a pitch. Mridang, common in Carnatic music. Pakhavaj, it's both are called mridang in formal terms. This is used with Drupad music, North Indian, Tamil. So we have 5 different types of instruments, like in any other kind of music. This is very popular with chanting, devotional chanting. Ghatam, Kanjira, claypot instrument. There are certain etiquettes that we maintain, touching feet and not touching our instruments with our feet, or not putting our instruments and shoes in the same bag, and so on and so forth. Nodding in Indian concerts, you sometimes hear a lot of sound, and people are nodding, clapping in between. Indian music is not gender, caste, or religion specific. And this is the final slide. Yeah? Okay. Now, in terms of talas, what specific questions or problems you have?
We use dholak. Is that the same as mridangam?
Dholak is, its origin is folk music, so mridangam is more classical, and dholak cannot play all talas. Very seldom. Extraordinary, there are few extraordinary dholak players who can play classical solo on that instrument, very, very rare. Because limited tones. Tabla has a capacity to imitate many other percussion instruments. Duff, for example. Or so it has, because of the rich or the wide tonal range, it has gives us that option to fit into all different kinds of music. Very versatile. And over the course of time, it's evolving more and more. We are using new materials, and the dholak is kind of limited in
You have to
scope.
play on the different
Sections of the
areas,
drum.
different sections.
Yes. Fascinating. So that's how it has such a developed language. How can you articulate all of that on the drum? Two-piece drum. So, yes, please.
When they say that this song starts on maybe 9th beat or 5th beat or some other beat, how do we know which beat should start?
Okay, so when the song starts, the one thing called intuition, right? But how do you develop that intuition? Over the course of time, being exposed to the different variety of repertoire songs and compositions, you kind of pick up the clue that this beat is being stressed in the composition, lyrically or melodically. So that is determined to be the downbeat. And from there you come through the cycle to find out where exactly it is starting from. But downbeat is your main. Da, 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 da. So that was the song, the opening. So easily discernible that da, da, da. So it's kind of rolling down. But climax, it is going up and then hitting the downbeat and then rolling down.
Tabla solo format.
Tabla solo format, over the course of time, since its inception, not too long ago, between 1700 and 1739, it has, through evolution, it has come up with 6 different gharanas, or schools or lineages, and each one of them have their own format of presentation. But more common these days, there is so much of interaction going on because the media, easy transportation, musicians are mingling, appreciating one another, picking up elements and applying them into their own repertoire. They still claim that I belong to Azrala Gharana, or I belong to Delhi Gharana, Lucknow Gharana, Punjab Gharana, but then they are also playing compositions from other Gharanas. So the common format is you start with something. In the past we used to call it utan, that I'm to begin with. I'm starting drawing attention of the people who are always talking. This is a rare moment when people are listening. And then after the utan, they do a high hello. That's called the peshka. So establish the mood of the tal, and then from there they move on to a type of composition called khaira. And we have heard this word quite often since 9/11, or khaira, meaning organization. So it's a type of composition which is meant to be presented in a very organized way. You come up with a theme and then make variations of that, conclude with something that we talked about, the tihai, and then move on to the next qaida. If you're in a mood, you can play something that's called a chalan, which is longer in length from the qaida. And then after that, you go into gat. Gat is something that we picked up from Kathak dance, from Awadh, Lucknow. And then we go into relas. At that time, rail was the fastest thing on earth. So fast compositions known as relas, based on dhere dhere, tere kete, and dhene kene. This is dhere dhere and dhene kene. These three basic types of sounds that we use to form a rela, and they're usually like sports car, meant to be played fast. And then afterwards, you add tukras, literally meaning a piece, and chakradar, something that goes on cycle. So you play it 3 times to cover one side, one downbeat to another. That's basically it. And the theka, which is a unique feature of Indian rhythmic system, particularly North Indian music system, that the talas are expressed with a particular set of drum notes as identity of the tal. No other rhythmic system has that. So din tal, as I said, dha, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, na, din, din, da, da, din, din, da. Or in case of rupak tal, it will be din, din, na, din, na, din, na. Or pancham swari. That's the identity of Pancham Swari. The moment you play that, anyone who knows about Pancham Swari will recognize, oh, you play Pancham Swari, or the composition is in Pancham Swari. Chartal ki savari. Savari meaning riding on something, so it's a galloping movement towards the end. And in Carnatic music, they just have tal, no specific set drum notes to, as said, as identity of the tal. This is unique. Tika. It comes from the Persian word tika, the permanent place. I've taken up a lot of time, but still just maybe 1 or 2 questions if you have. Yes, please.
Sometimes when people play some songs, something, their teka may be, maybe dagra, and then they go to gharwa. So,
we call them tal firta, meaning you are changing.
Yeah.
So
question is how common it is, and what is the benefit that we get when we go from one to the other?
okay, it's not very common to begin with, and the benefit or the reason why that happens, because you are bringing us to a very important point. What is the source or origin of tal? It is the lyrical scanning of the song, of the composition. The most recent example is Tagore, who had to create a number of tals because the songs he wrote wouldn't conform to the bar pattern, the rhythmic pattern, although it is a 10-beat cycle or a 7-beat cycle, but they are not conforming with the traditional ones. So he said, I can't compromise on my lyrical scanning. I can't change my lyric. So he created a few new tals with the same number of beats. So tals originate from the lyrical scanning of the songs. That is the original tal. Yes, please.
So you mentioned the 10 additional microtones added to the 12. My question was, in Indian classical music, are the 12 today systematized to match what our, Western 12 tones are, or are those even a little bit different?
Compromise has become the way to live. Ideally, they are not. We recently, on recommendation from Summit, we had a great opportunity to listen to and interact with one of the most authentic representatives of Indian classical music, was that Nasiruddin Sami. In some of the sessions we had with him, he said, you were talking about these 22, these are like landmarks. They're not limited to those. Why not 49? Break these intervals down to even more. Because there was one occasion he was singing in the morning and Kedar Nafri was there present, and he asked at the end of the concert that I heard more than one sa. Did I hear it wrong? We often refer to sa and pa as constant. Are they really constant? So Indian music, in essence, utilizes that variable possibility. And it is always left to the performer how they perceive the melody, how they perceive the raga, how they're feeling at that moment. The gandhar, the rekha, the sixth of the seventh, all of these notes, even the fifth, sometimes, not just the sa, the fifth also.
Like, I was wondering if the octaves lined up to the way we think of them. It sounds like no, not necessarily, right?
And fortunately, through ear training, we are able to still recognize, because I work with the Manhattan School of Music, New School, and getting an opportunity to work with Western musicians. Even on the piano, they struggle. On the harp, they bring out, use the pedal, and on the saxophone, on all keyed instruments, they try, because once you are able to hear it, you don't think your instrument is a limitation or it's there to limit the possibilities. Instruments are an extension of human voice, basically. And that's what Samarth and Anirban will establish, how they interact, the voice and the instrument. May I please?
So I think before you go though, I think it would be great if you can do a demonstration where we can have the audience clap to the matras.
Oh, yes.
Yes, let's do that. So I think the slide is gone, but you remember the bowls from the slide, which was ta tin tin ta tin tin ta, na tin tin ta tin tin ta. So the way we clap this out, right? It's divided into 4 beats per measure, we can say. So we start with the clap, which is your sum or your downbeat. So ta, tin, tin, ta, tin, tin, ta, na, tin, ta, tin, ta. And we just keep repeating this cycle. And then what Samir will do is we'll start that way simply, and then where the question was asked about how do we know when we start at 5, or how do we know we can demonstrate those? Samir can demonstrate those things on tabla.
Well, with this kind of this level of audience, I would take something more interesting here.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I will do. Yeah, please, thank you. I will take up a rhythmic cycle of 10 beats. How is that? We can do it? Yeah! So,
It'll be a little bit
divided
more
2, 3, 2, 3.
I'll be here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Join me, please. 3, sorry.
9, 10,
1, 2.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
What I'm just doing right now, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, I'm fitting in more 5s in the 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You were fantastic. Simon, enjoy your session, please.
Thank you so much, Samir.